Leandria Johnson has ignited a firestorm that no one in the gospel community saw coming, and insiders are calling this one of the biggest ministry shakeups in recent memory. According to those close to the situation, Johnson has stepped forward with a series of explosive claims about Pastor Brian Carn, the widely recognized leader of Dominion Grace Cathedral, a megachurch known for its electrifying worship services, massive conferences, and worldwide online influence. What she revealed didn't come in the form of vague suggestions or passive comments. She laid out a detailed picture of what she says has been happening behind the scenes for years, and these statements have instantly pushed the conversation far beyond traditional church gossip. Members are confused, leadership is scrambling, social media is erupting, and the story continues evolving with every passing hour. In a ministry that has long been celebrated for its spiritual impact, philanthropic work, and massive following, Cross's allegations have opened a door into a side of leadership that many supporters never imagined existed. According to Cross, her involvement with Carn's ministry began several years ago when she was invited to headline one of Dominion Grace Cathedral's national worship tours. At the time, everything appeared picture perfect. The lights, the stage, the production, the spiritual energy. Everything presented an image of excellence and unity. But as she became more deeply involved with the ministry, Johnson claims she began noticing patterns that were inconsistent with the integrity the church publicly promoted. She describes what she calls a culture of control behind the scenes, where decisions were centralized around Carn's approval and where disagreement was seen as disloyalty. According to her, it wasn't just about leadership structure. It was about the tone, the pressure, and the way individuals were allegedly treated when they raised concerns. Johnson says she witnessed staff members being reprimanded harshly for questioning financial decisions, artists being pressured to follow certain directives for the sake of the ministry's image, and volunteers feeling intimidated even when bringing up simple issues. The core of her claim, however, goes deeper than internal tension. Johnson alleges that certain financial practices within the ministry were not handled with the transparency that members believed. She describes situations where large donations from conferences, concerts, and online campaigns were reportedly directed into leadership-controlled accounts without clear explanation. According to Cross, individuals who worked in administrative roles confided in her about irregular patterns involving event funds, expense reports, and payout structures. She says these conversations were private, cautious, and often filled with fear because staff members didn't want to be seen as challenging Carn's authority. Johnson claims the ministry environment had become one where people were reluctant to speak openly, even if they felt something was ethically questionable. But the story does not end with her perspective alone. Pastor Brian Carn has responded privately within leadership circles, and according to insiders, he has strongly denied Cross's claims, stating that she is misrepresenting events due to personal grievances. Individuals close to Carn suggest that tensions between the two began long before Johnson went public. They claim Carn felt Johnson had become increasingly difficult to work with, particularly regarding scheduling, honorariums, and certain ministry expectations. According to those aligned with Carn, he believes Cross's statements are emotion-driven exaggerations, influenced by disagreements over how much influence artists like her should have within church events. They argue that Johnson wanted more creative freedom, while Carn insisted on maintaining strict spiritual guidelines for all ministry activities. These insiders claim that the conflict escalated when Johnson pushed back against leadership directives and was eventually removed from an upcoming major conference lineup, which they believe triggered her decision to speak out publicly. Cross, however, refutes that narrative entirely. She says her decision to speak has nothing to do with scheduling conflicts or creative disputes. She claims she remained silent for years, watching what she describes as a pattern of manipulation, unchecked power, and spiritual intimidation, and finally felt compelled to step forward because she could no longer reconcile what she saw behind closed doors with what the ministry portrayed publicly. In her own words, the issue is not personal, it is systemic. She argues that the ministry has grown so large and influential that people feel obligated to tolerate questionable practices because calling them out might cost them their platform, their community, or even their livelihood. Johnson says she reached her breaking point after witnessing an incident involving a young worship leader who allegedly questioned a finance-related directive and was swiftly removed from multiple ministry programs as a result. According to Cross, the speed and severity of the reaction confirmed her belief that the ministry was operating under a leadership style that discouraged accountability. The situation became even more complicated when additional voices began to speak up. Several former staff members, though not directly associated with Cross, took to social media to share their own experiences, describing what they called a high-pressure environment and fear of leadership retaliation. While none of these individuals provided documentation, their stories echoed similar themes: centralized control, limited financial clarity, and internal tension surrounding major ministry decisions. These posts gained rapid attention, adding fuel to an already growing controversy and putting more pressure on Carn and his leadership team to respond. Meanwhile, supporters of Carn have pushed back, stating that large ministries naturally experience internal conflict and that disgruntled former staff members often misinterpret spiritual discipline as personal attack. They argue that Carn has spent years building a ministry that has helped thousands and that his leadership style, while firm, is rooted in protecting the spiritual integrity of the church. As the public debate intensifies, Carn's team has released limited but carefully worded statements, assuring supporters that the ministry remains committed to transparency, accountability, and internal review. They emphasize that church finances undergo annual audits and that all major decisions are overseen by a board of elders. However, insiders claim that behind the scenes, the leadership team is under significant strain as they attempt to navigate the mounting pressure. There are reports of emergency meetings, temporary event pauses, and internal discussions about restructuring certain roles within the church. Some staff members fear that the situation could lead to long-term reputational damage, while others believe the ministry will emerge stronger after addressing concerns. Cross, on the other hand, has continued to speak through interviews and live streams, maintaining that her goal is not to tear down the church, but to push for accountability. She insists that her concerns reflect the experiences of many who have remained silent, and that this moment presents an opportunity for honest reform. While she has not released documents, screenshots, or financial records, her influence alone has been powerful enough to start a movement of questions that church leaders can no longer ignore. Meanwhile, Carn has privately accused Leandria Johnson of inciting division and misleading the public, claiming her statements have created unnecessary turmoil at a time when the ministry was preparing for one of its largest outreach events. The tension between the two continues to escalate as more voices join the conversation. Some gospel artists have posted cryptic messages hinting that they support truth over image, while others have defended Carn, saying that leadership should not be judged based on unverified claims. Church members have begun organizing meetings, demanding clarity on financial processes and leadership conduct. Even outside observers, commentators, bloggers, and online review platforms have begun addressing the situation, each adding their own perspective on how spiritual institutions handle power. As this drama unfolds, the central question remains: what will happen to Dominion Grace Cathedral? If Cross's claims reflect deeper issues within the ministry, there may be a significant shift in how members view leadership. If Carn supporters are correct, and this is all rooted in personal misunderstanding, the ministry may push through the controversy and move forward. But one thing is clear: the conversation has expanded beyond the individuals involved. It has sparked a broader discussion about accountability in faith-based leadership, transparency in financial stewardship, and the responsibility that comes with influence. Leandria Johnson argues that spiritual authority should never go unchecked, and that people deserve to know how decisions are made within the institutions they support. Cole argues that leadership requires firm direction, and that public disputes can harm the unity of the church. Both sides present narratives shaped by their experiences, and the truth may lie somewhere in the complex overlap of personal perception, structural flaws, and long-standing tension. What happens next may define the future of the ministry and possibly influence how other large churches handle similar controversies moving forward. As more details emerge, supporters, critics, and curious onlookers continue watching, waiting, and debating. And as this story evolves, one reality remains. The gospel community is now forced to confront difficult questions about leadership, power, and the delicate balance between spiritual authority and transparency.